Hi, welcome back to another edition of Inside Great Lakes Sailing. My name is Greg Normand, your host. Now, we've been off for a couple of months and we weren't going to come back until March, but circumstances allowed us to pull together some shows that might be of interest at this point in the sailing season, especially for us up here in the cold, frigid north. And we wanted to maybe have some water cooler discussion about a number of issues, and we're going to try and bring that to you today, as well as our February show, which will air somewhere in the neighborhood of about February 25th. So to get started on this particular show, we get a chance to spend some time with US Sailing's new Olympic coordinator and director, Molly Vandemoer. And Molly's going to spend some time talking to us about replacing Marcus Lynch. And with the 28 Olympics coming up in Los Angeles, Molly is a former Olympian as far as world champion, spent some time on a boat with Anna Tunnicliffe winning some world championships. So there's a local connection. And I think you'll find that our interview with Molly is pretty insightful. Marcus Lynch did a great job in the interim, and the new format for Olympics is going to maybe change a little bit. That's a conversation we're going to have this summer. We talked a little bit about that with Molly. And the entire Olympic staff are female, which I think is terrific because we're now talking about quality, and maybe gender kind of goes out the window. So that'll be a fun interview. We also spent some time with Keith Stauber, and we're going to talk a little bit about the value of PHRF as it relates to U.S. sailing. There's been a variety of discussions and a variety of topics. It's been something that's been brought up to the new executive director for US Sailing, Charlie Enright. And we thought we'd explore it a little bit to try to give you a layman's understanding. There's been these long-standing arguments about our ORC as well as PHRF, and I think it's a world that maybe they can both live in. We try to make that explanation. So we'll get to that in a couple of seconds, and hopefully that's a cool thing. We want to bring you this year a little more up close and personal. We're going to certainly do the long-term interviews, but we also are going to get out with the boat, and we're kind of giving up coaching sports, and we're going to get back to being around the sailing world. And the show for 2026 is going to be a slightly different format. We're going to try and bring you less long-term interviews unless we get somebody of note, and we're going to bring you hopefully a whole bunch of on-the-water activity, including racing. We are currently trying to figure out a way to put together a racing crew for Reliance, a 30-0 day out of Crescent, which is my boat, and maybe campaign some of the beer league stuff on Mondays and the two-handed, and we'll have that information as we come forward. We want to make you aware of a couple of things that are going on. The Detroit Community Sailing Center, something we've been a very strong part of and trying to raise funds for, is looking for instructors, so certainly take the opportunity to do that. And we're going to unveil a fundraiser for them, and we'll do that a little bit probably in early March before we get to that point. Howard Jones is a terrific guy and runs a great program for a bunch of kids, and we always want to be able to give him an opportunity. The Detroit Charter Company has got a really unique opportunity. Ken Copart has got two Santa Cruz 70s. You can rent one for the day, the evening. You can also rent one for big-time racing. We'll bring you that interview next month, and we talked to Ken, and I think that was something that was kind of cool. One of the subjects we want to kind of tackle, the Yacht Racing Union of the Great Lakes. There's been some discussion about with borders and not coming into American or Canadian waters. There's been a discussion about the revamped Richardson Cup, which is what they do. They haven't run it since 2019. The Richardson Cup is a long-standing competition for match racing. And it's also on the same level as what the Barthel Trophy was, which is obviously given to the winner of the two MAC races, as well as the every other year Trans-Superior race. So we're going to work a little bit with the Yacht Racing Union. There's been some discussion about can they this, can they that. Supposedly Chicago is going to sponsor the Richardson Cup this year, but when we talk to folks over there, there doesn't seem to be much of an interest to find a sponsor. A lot of this came out from a writer in Canada named Roger Renound, who is part of Sailing in Canada, the magazine, and he kind of floated the boat. There is a small group of folks in this country and in Canada that are looking at trying to resurrect, maybe put Lake Ontario and Lake Erie into the competition for the overall Barthel role, and they've kind of have figured that out. Since 2002, the union kind of figured out that the three-lake race made sense. But we're going to delve into this because it's an interesting subject. And we speculated on Facebook earlier this year that maybe that was a pipe dream. I apologize to Roger because I didn't realize they had taken that much of care of the process. And I think that's kind of cool. And we'll explore that. We've got a lot coming at you. We're going to bring our show for end of January, into February, and then we get into the end of March. We'll get back to every 10 days or so. We hope you like the show. It's hard to believe we're in our 6th year, but we're going to get out on the water and do a little bit more this year because we're kind of giving up the high school coaching and some of the other stuff to kind of pursue this. And we think it's fun and enjoyable, and we hope you stay tuned. Up next is a conversation with Molly all about the Olympics, and I think it's a conversation you'll enjoy. Welcome back. We're chatting with Molly Vandemoer, who has just been appointed the new Olympic sailor for US Sailing. We're talking to you from California. Am I correct on that?
Yes.
So you're still in the morning, but we've gotten rid of Marcus Lynch. We've moved in a former Olympian, former world champion, former teammate to a local young lady here at Anna-Tunnicliffe. And first of all, congratulations on the appointment. And what sort of precipitated the process?
Thank you for having me. How did I get here today? In the last, year and a half or so, I was a director on the US Sailing Board. And by kind of having a seat there at that table, I was able to kind of see the landscape and see where we're at and become a sounding board to anybody and everybody that was involved in the sport. And I'd say about a month ago now, maybe a month and a half ago, that's when Charlie kind of said, "Hey, look, would love for you to take this over and run with it." And so here we are today.
It is an interesting position. There's been this sort of the last 4 or 5 years, a little bit of a roller coaster, and I think with Charlie being appointed, it's settled down, and certainly you bring some great strength and opportunity, and certainly background. You're, like I said, you're a world champion in match racing, a snipe world champion, college All-American, raced at the University of Hawaii. Those are the credentials. So the first question, talk a little bit about Marcus Lynch and what he kind of did over the last couple of years to kind of maybe put you guys in pretty good position, and what's the short-term mission plan?
Yes. So Marcus did a great job. He kind of came in, I'd say, late in the game. There was a lot of turnover, and he stepped in and presented an excellent team at the games, had a fantastic showing and of our team in Paris or Marseille. And I'd say set us up well to kind of move forward with how our kind of pipeline works and how the tiering system is, and how I'd say we can all kind of be from, I think that the challenging part about our country is we're huge. And so you have people that are centered in each of their home bases. If you think, it's almost like we have each of our own little countries. If you compare it to Europe or you compare it to another country, but he did a great job of kind of setting the stage, and he was in a challenging place because you're kind of wearing, like, am I the coach? Am I the logistics? Am I the gatekeeper? Am I the peacemaker? What does the role really entail? And so that's kind of where he's set up this position and set up the team to kind of go forward for LA.
His title was high performance director. Yours is actually the Olympic sailing director. Is that just a semantical argument, or is there a specific as to why that was?
I think it's, I don't know if it's specific. You could probably ask Charlie that question if that's a specific thing, but the way I see, a high performance director is very focused on coaching and putting together each athlete's plan and working with all the various coaches. In my view, the director of Olympic sailing, as I see it, is somebody who kind of wears all the hats, coordinates the coaches, coordinates the people that are going to make it happen, that coordinates the logistics, coordinates the budget, all the things. and not just specifically the coaching and the performance plans of the athletes.
So CEO.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
You got obviously the sailing record there's no doubt about that. What's prepared you from a personal standpoint? What's prepared you for the CEO position of this to tackle all of this?
Yeah. So for the last 10, 15 years or so, like since the games, I have been running a nonprofit here in the Bay Area in San Francisco. And in essence, it does all of those things on, a local level, on a national level, not an international level. Take a budget from, I think it was like 50,000 or something silly, non-existent when I started, to, $1.5 million budget. And, a community sailing center is very different than trying to win an Olympic gold. But the infrastructure and the framework to make that happen is actually pretty similar. And that's sort of the CEO hat. And so understanding all the steps to make it possible, but also how to fund it and how to get all the people involved to be on the same page and those pieces. It kind of comes from both. It comes from all the sailing and the fundraising I did still today with my racing and sailing, but also with the running of a nonprofit in the Bay Area.
I'm not going to ask you, having only been in a job 2.5 weeks, of sort of the detailed plans, but I think there's a couple of things that are important. First, where are you headed, and are we financed well enough? And I asked this question because when we had a chance to talk to Paul Caird a couple of years ago, it was very clear. I'm in the ski world, the ski racing world, at the national level, and Paul did a real sort of a step into the US ski program to look at their structure. And I think that was a lot of his direction. So my question is, are we financed enough? Are we providing enough for our athletes? And is that as much of a push as building the facilities and all the physical structure that's needed to be able to be because we're not the best Olympic team in the country, in the world. I think that's a fair statement. Is that fairly close?
So is your question, do we have enough money to support our athletes? And the answer is always going to be no. We always need more finances to kind of hit all of the things you're saying. So do the athletes have enough, and are they comfortable enough and able to win gold medals? That's first. And, the assets and, the building and the stuff we need to be the home team. In LA, that also is funding related. So short answer is no, we always need more funding. But the bigger answer is yes. If you look at our country, we are an incredibly wealthy country, and we have a lot of passionate people that would love and do love to be behind the team. So I guess it's like a twofold answer, like if somebody asked me, are you all set? No, we'd always love more help. But are we capable of all working together and getting our athletes the support? Yes.
Money equals opportunity. Would you agree with that?
Totally. Yeah.
And without the opportunity, you obviously don't have money. And I think that's a pipeline that needs to certainly, work itself through and provide for that. With 28 coming up to Los Angeles and all of the discussion of whether you're going to be in Long Beach or you're going to be out on the ocean and all the other discussions, I think that's kind of a side point. Does the Olympics in our backyard put a little more pressure on you as the Olympic sailing director?
I don't know if it's more pressure. It's, it's another thing to do. It's having two venues, having the two venues being San Pedro and Long Beach, having the two venues work together and be efficient, and how to, be good hosts, right? And also be really supportive of the home team. There's that kind of dynamic to juggle, but it isn't drastically different from when you go to another country and you have to jump in and figure out how to work with whoever that host is and figure out how you're going to fit in there when it's games times versus training time, lead up and such. So when you look at like the real nuts and bolts, it's not a huge difference. It's just maybe more people want your ear because it's your home, right? So
Right. No, I get it.
yeah.
Yeah, everybody wants front row seats. You're busking tickets to get the best seat in the house. I get that part. If you look at the website right now, you've got yourself and there's two other young ladies that are part of the Olympic committee or part of the Olympic staff. The question I want to ask is it about time? Is it unique, or is it we've just hired really good sailing instructors and gender shouldn't matter?
Oh, for gender? Um, I didn't, I mean, I've thought about it, I guess, but it's not a specific choice. It just,
Hire
the
the
right
best person.
people, yeah, the people are
Okay.
there and sweet. They happen to be female.
I asked that. There's a locally. There's a couple of things coming out. There's a movie with Dawn Riley about the AC-40 and all the stuff that they'd gone through, and we've interviewed some of those folks. And I've been arguing for 5 years on this show that gender shouldn't matter. Best person should matter. It's do you want economy brain surgery? And I don't. If I had to have it, I'd want obviously the best doctor in the room. So we'll let that question go. I'm assuming that this is a full-time gig and it's with family. Is it the kind of job, obviously, you don't have to move to Bristol, or is it one of those things you can work from home from where you are now?
Not moving to Bristol, and yes, it's actually a benefit in my view to be in California. We have obviously home games are here in same time zone. Next we'll be in Brisbane. Our country is huge. I am, it's great actually to kind of be on an East Coast time. I wake up super early, get a whole bunch done. Then, life wakes up here in California. I start to get more stuff done. It's actually, I find it a benefit. So I think your question was, am I moving to Bristol? No. And do I think it's great living in, or being in California? Yes, for, obvious reasons, for being able to deal with the folks and everything that's happening in California.
Sometimes I'm looking out my window and it's 4 degrees above zero here. We have a ski race tonight, and I keep thinking of my 25 years of living in Encinitas. And when I look at the snow, sometimes I wish I was back home, but I understand the premise. In our Olympic landscape, what are we good at? And I'm talking about specific areas. Are we good at 49ers? Are we good at 470s? What's our strength? Maybe what's something we have to work on? And then there's also a lot of conversation about changing the scoring systems and changing the approach to the Olympics, partly because I think there's a lot of folks at television who think they have some sort of idea that they want to make more money because it's got to be more friendly to that. And I think that was certainly true in Barcelona, where you shut off ESPN Plus on the last day of the trials and they put on pickleball on the West Coast because it was attracting more folks.
So across the classes, we've got returners and players kind of in every class. I think the talk about, hey, the format's changing and what is the game's going to be and what are we doing to sailing? That's always sort of like, the bar talk on shore. So I happen to sit for the last year or so, I've been sitting on the events committee at World Sailing. And that is actually kind of what started my interest in like, oh, I really want to make a difference. I want to help see what I can do. When I started to get back into the, Olympic realm and seeing the big picture. So short answer is yes, the format is changing. It's really pushing towards shorter race courses, making it easier to see and understand to the folks from Kansas, or whatever, the people that are 100%, think the Olympics is great and we want to hope to win a gold medal. What's this sport all about? Does that kind of put salt in the wound for the people that are like, but I loved, sailing upwind for 30 minutes and tacking twice and whatever, right? Like the longer courses. Yes. And, same with when you threw a kiteboard out there or something that was foiling. What is this? Is this sailing or not? What's one of those, like, change is hard, and this is one of the changes that's happening. So these shorter courses, a little bit different format. Does that help our sailors or hurt our sailors? I'd say that, if you look at what the majority of our kids do growing up, it's a lot of short course racing, and it's a lot of boat on boat interaction versus, straight out like monster boat speed. What it's morphing into is obviously at anything at an Olympic level, you have to be good at all of it, right? So the people that love the 30-minute beat are going to get better at their acceleration so that when they're tacking 6 times, they're faster at it, that kind of thing. So kind of a roundabout long answer, but I think the changes in the format, they're unavoidable and you have to learn how to embrace them. And I think our country is set up to do well in the new format, kind of going forward, just because of our infrastructure of our youth and our, pathway that's been in existence for a long time and is strong and well established.
I asked a question. I was in Marseille, and I know the press room conversation. Part of I think the main issue with sort of publicity is that a lot of the folks who cover sailing are not maybe the best guys that in the room to write. If you're in the sales GP for Chicago, you have the guy that covers the school board. He comes out and that's his second job. He goes out and covers a sail race. Mm-hmm. You have a press conference. You don't get to ask questions. They set up, it's almost an infomercial. Some of it's internal, but part of the deal with Marseille was sort of that discussion. We were also involved in this ILCA conversations. We talked to the guys at Performance Sailcraft and some of those discussions, and it just gets caught in the minutia. And a poor guy trying to sell a commercial to NBC, it becomes a different dynamic, and that's kind of the reason I was asking the question. There's this sort of infight that has nothing to do with sailors, but it is part of the landscape. If we're going to grow the Olympic program, does junior programs, does we have to attract more younger sailors to make the pipeline larger to try to develop those champions, or is it what it is now?
I think the interest and the infrastructure at a youth level is there. It's not that it's not there. And what are we going to do? It's making sure that they understand there's next steps, So if you look at a kid that's graduated from college, they're going to jump right into what's easy and laid out and kind of, they're used to the junior scene and then maybe the high school sailing and then maybe the college, right? And so what the kid is looking for, let's say he's the Opti Phenom, right? Or he or she is the, college sailor of the year or whatever it might be, the person that has aspirations of winning a gold medal at some point, right? They need to have that framework and that groundwork laid out in front of them so that they understand like, oh, great. I could jump in and, go to work and do the keelboat team racing setup that's at my local yacht club because there's boats there and there's, the schedule's already set and there's people to sail with and all that kind of stuff. That is what, those folks that we want to or have the dream of getting onto this Olympic pathway. That's what we need here in our country. And that's what, has been laid out for the last couple quads. And so it's just making sure that that's a clear pathway. It's clear for people to step into that if they'd like to. It's clear to be able to find them. There's like a lot of those pieces along that little like framework or whatever.
One of the sort of running questions throughout these shows when we have conversations with coaches like yourself, I come from other sports as a coach. And in this sport, when we had the opportunity to hire junior sailors, I keep hearing about how great their sailing background is. And I keep asking the question, can they teach? Can they communicate? And I keep being told that they're great sailors. From a conventional standpoint and a sort of an experienced coach, I don't really care how well you sail. I care whether or not the information is imparted. I think it's a slight weakness, at least at the entry level from at least the Great Lakes. Am I in the ballpark, or do you find that to be true, or is it just my imagination?
No, it's kind of similar setup where you have your a lot of instructors that help make this whole framework happen, right? So level 1, level 2, level 3, like our standard sailing coach, right, is like the instructor levels 1, 2, and 3, whatever it might be, and then that framework laid out for the folks that are the great sailors, but then realize like, oh, teaching is actually my thing. Learning how to get to that next level of coaching, it goes hand in hand with the sailor being able to see what's next, and also the educator or the future educator. There's a really cool like women in coaching, women's pathway in coaching that is like an initiative that's part of US Sailing. It's about a year plus old. Things like that help make that framework and help make that, an easy step for the person that has that thought in their head, not the Olympic gold, but maybe coaching somebody to an Olympic gold, right?
What was your favorite discipline as a sailor? What is it that you like to do more than anything else?
That's a big question.
Let me narrow the question. You had the opportunity to spend some time, and we mentioned earlier that you spent some time with Anna Tunnicliffe, who obviously was one of your partners, and you won a world championship. She's a local girl. I got to believe that you guys had learned from each other. She has a rather intense personality when she's involved in anything, and I think that's what made her so well. And the same with you is so. Talk briefly about your relationship with her and sailing, and what it is that you really love more than anything as a racer. What kind of boat do you like?
Okay. So yes, sailing with Anna and Debbie. I like your screenshot behind you. That was amazing. I love match racing. I still do match racing today. It's the discipline that I probably quickly jump into if I get a window to be able to go sailing, because, and this sort of answers the bigger question, what I really like about sailing is the teamwork idea. So I could be on a team of 10 people, 3 people, whatever it is. What I love is being able to like be the best at my job, but also help everybody else be better at their job. And so whatever discipline that's in, awesome. And so, for example, I've done a bunch of match racing. When I jumped back into competitive sailing a couple of years ago, still doing it, and I love it. But I'm also going to be doing an IC37 regatta in September, and not match racing, it's fleet racing, but kind of same idea. And I think there are 9 of us on the boat. Maybe there's 10. I think there's 9 of us on the boat. And it's that basically, how do we all come together? How do we, be the best at what we can do? And, your point of like, Anna's a pretty intense person. Yep. So am I. I can also be the equalizer and keep everybody chill. But, when I think that's why I like match racing so much, my goal is that I'm going to kill that opponent, and I'm going to do everything I can to do that. And, that's what makes you a competitor, right?
I looked right for a second. I was going to pull off my IC37 hat. We just interviewed the new owners of Marcus, and it was kind of fun having that conversation about how you carry this great company through. And both the Harrys have been on, so it was an interesting. I was just looking for a hat, but I can't find it in the short term. It's a great boat. It's an absolutely phenomenal boat, and it's kind of fun, from that standpoint. Do you do much sailing just cruising, or is it pretty much, as most racers, you're kind of oriented to going fast?
I grew up doing a lot of cruising. I went to Catalina every summer with my family, went to the Coronado Islands. Like that was our free time. That's how we went camping, I guess you'd say. But I don't have a lot of free time, and to be able to go sailing and do other things. And so when I go sailing, typically the windows are taken up by a race of some sort. So short answer is no, I have not done any cruising in a fair amount of time, but doesn't mean that I don't miss it. So
yeah. Well, I mentioned it, having spent a lot of time in San Diego. If you know where the paddle boat is, the old restaurant used to be on the end of Harbor Island. I was the last slip out of that Harbor Island because I couldn't afford to belong like you guys, the San Diego Yacht Club. But it was my office was downtown, so we had the local ones. I try to leave each interview with sort of a question. You're an accomplished cook, so, and again, just doing some research, and I've been told that you're really good at it. If you were developing a team diet, what would that relationship be? If you're not a nutrition, I get it, but if you had everybody over to the house, sort of the Olympic team a couple nights before, what's your specialty as a cook?
What an interesting question. I would probably, if I'm having like the whole team over, I would do a big barbecue of some sort. I'd probably have some sort of salmon and some ribs and, the barbecue piece, and then have everybody else bring sides. Because again, it's sort of like the way I like to do everything. It's got to be like a team effort. So, everybody has a little buy-in, everybody's, taking part to make the evening what it is. So everybody, bring a six pack, bring a side, bring something to share.
Is cooking the singular sort of activity that kind of gets away from that competitive world of sailing?
I think I guess cooking's not super competitive. I've never really thought of it that way. I think you're grabbing onto this. My guess is that when I was sailing in my match racing campaign, I was like the cook. I like did all the food for the three of us.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I love being able to share a meal with people. I love when people, it's like a way to share something, and it shouldn't cost anything, right? It's just a way to give to somebody else. And if it tastes good and they're fueled and they're stoked to come back, then even better. So
I asked a question because somebody had asked Anna for me to ask you, and she talked a little about you and your background. And as Charlie's putting this sort of structure together, if you look at Sarah, the new communications director, and if you look at yourself and you look at the people he's picking, there's a real structure here that's going in place that is bright, intelligent, to the point. It's really nice to see the folks that are being hired, because I think it's going in the right direction. And Anna pointed out that you're one of those that you don't leave any stone unturned. And I think that's really good for US Sailing. And I'm not doing a commercial, but as we're interviewing people, you want this organization to really to do well.
yeah.
And with the experience you have and with the brains that come with that, I think that's important. And I really like the idea that asking earlier about having, females versus just hire the best folks. And obviously you're one of those. So appreciate your time. Anything we can do in the future, we'd certainly more than happy to help you. And we'll see you at the Olympics, I'm sure, in 28. So I appreciate your time and thank you.
Amazing. Thanks, Greg. This was great.
At the U.S. Center for Safe Sport, ending abuse is not just our job, it's our promise.
Welcome back. We're spending some time in the winter as we're bringing our show back in January, having just interviewed Molly, who's our new Olympic coach. We're talking with our favorite sailor from Duluth, PHRF Midwest Chair, Keith Stauber, and this and that voice conversations is that we like to take some conversations during the winter and have some discussion about some things that might be sort of a water cooler conversation. And one of the things we want to try to do with this conversation is talk a little bit about PHRF and where it fits with US Sailing. As Charlie Enright, the new CEO of US Sailing, is sort of putting his structure together. Keith, you and I have had this conversation about maybe US Sailing is missing a link with PHRF, not only a financial link, but maybe also a resource link. Is that a fair characterization?
Yes. PHRS organizations have gotten a little passed over, and Charlie and Henry are both looking at this now after our stakeholder meeting in Rhode Island. And in all honesty, they were starting to look at how to make this better prior to that meeting as well.
Okay. So right now, your PHRF used to have a revenue stream from PHRF applications and application fees. Because of the staff as being kind of, it's sort of a long-term, somebody retired, it just kind of get pushed off to the side. And maybe this is kind of a restarting point to have the discussion where you have to belong to US Sailing as part of getting a perf. And in this case, you're the last perf section to require people to join US Sailing. And so this is sort of a conversation about how you sort of put a couple of bricks in the foundation to make it better. So in a perfect world, what would you do to address perf in US sailing and how we might be able to synergize that relationship better than what it is?
Well, first off, US Sailing has tried to put back together our red, white, and blue book, which was a national directory of how all PHRFs rated boats.
Okay.
And that's a very, very good tool when you're researching the history and performance history of a boat. And we're hoping to get that going again, but it's going to take staffing and it's going to take money. And the revenue stream from PHRF to US Sailing went away. For one thing, we used to pay, I think, a $750 a year fee to the PHRF group at US Sailing. And those all kind of disappeared, and we actually didn't even get billed for them anymore. So a number of the organizations just quit paying at all. Now, we still pay a membership fee as an organization, but not the PHRF organization for the fees. The other thing is we historically required our members receiving a certificate to be US Sailing members. And all the other PHRF organizations, again, with lack of support, kind of quit requiring that. And eventually we did as well. I don't know if we could reinstitute that, but it would be something I could at least entertain, as US Sailing is our organization. And we need some help from them, but we also need to figure out how to pay them to do services that we require.
The reason I'm having this conversation is if you look at, we've been doing a lot of research on national governing bodies that relates to sailing and how it kind of fits. If you're going to be a national governing body, then you should probably have most of the folks that are involved in the sport under the same tent. That makes sense if you're overseeing the national sport, both at the Olympic level and in this case, the rules level of what most of us operate by. That being the case, this is a good example, and a very small one, but it's a good example of the disconnect between US Sailing and obviously PERF organizations. And maybe as you're opening that conversation up, it becomes that, because I think US Sailing, tell me if I'm wrong, but they might have the resources when they get back up empowered manpower-wise, when they have more bodies there, because right now they're starting to flesh out the staff, and that's not going to happen in a week. But they might have more resources to say on the research side. It also gives them another opportunity for a revenue stream, and it might only be 1 or 2% of whatever it might used to be. And you guys generate something under $50,000 because of the IRS threshold within the PERF division. And I guess the follow to it up would also open up an opportunity for people to join and enroll with US Sailing. Is that a fair characterization?
Yeah, I mean, that would be my goal, is to be able to help US Sailing both with funding and with membership and, bigger all organization. I mean, for example, there's a number of people that work on ORC, and ORC is a great thing. It's, kind of the lead in the pencil, the point of the knife with developing new boats and ideas, and it's very good. But there are way more common racers using PERF. If there's 1,200 ORC certificates, there might be 15 or 20,000 PHRF certificates issued nationwide. And yet the ORC resources are larger. And I'm not trying to diminish ORC or take any funding away from that group. That's as well necessary, and we need it. But the common citizen sailor kind of took a little bit of a backseat, and we just need to reestablish a better place.
We talked earlier, and I made mention that if you look at football, the football rules that used in the National Football League, there are 30 rule changes between National Football League and college, and there's another 25 or 30 that are different from high school. I always love to watch a high school guy watching television with a pro game and yell at the television and try to apply a rule that he knew that his high school kid was involved when it has nothing to do with the pro. the misunderstanding of the rule books is part of the premise. And here's the point. I've listened to ORC. I've had these conversations, and I'm the dumbest guy in the room when it comes to this conversation, but I think I've learned a little bit. If you look at the PHRF scale right now on the US Sailing site, you're going to see, I don't know, half a dozen or more regions with all different kinds of ratings. I'll use my own 30 day boat, from a 177 to a 192, depending on whether or not you're in Southern California, Florida, Vermont, or Michigan. The point to it is that PERF is very much regionalized in the way they look at things because of weather, because of all kinds of conditions. About 75% of the boats right now racing, and according to US Sailing, are PERF boats, not ORC. And the guys that complain about PERF are, generally speaking, and this is my opinion, not anybody else's, are the guys at the top of the ladder, because one is a scientific system versus this more subjective process. But they both have absolute perfect, now that I've learned more, they now both have perfect applications for the needs and the people they serve. And now the connection has to go back, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, now maybe the idea goes back that there's a better connection between US Sailing and those divisional parts of PHRF. Is that a layman's? Am I close?
Yeah, absolutely correct.
Okay.
And the folks we've talked to, and we routinely call other people, our technical people will call and look at other PHRF organizations where we know that they have a certain boat, and have discussions about how those boats compare to a certain base boat set and criteria. So behind the scenes, we all work together and try to do the best we can. Unfortunately, we used to have this tool that was published, every year. Every organization sent all their new or rating changes to US Sailing. It got compiled, and a compiled book came back to us, and we could just look it up. And if we had questions, then, go other places. But that resource went away, and we really need to get it back.
And one of the parts of this show is that in the wintertime, we want to have these sort of water cooler discussions so that it sort of bubbles up. This is a great time when you're sitting around the yacht club to have those conversations, because you can't sail. Again, for us up in the Midwest. And I think it would be cool if somebody would listen in Newport. And I think they are. I think the doors are open for that opportunity. So maybe as they learn a little bit more and pick this up, it can help on enrollment. It can help on retention. It certainly can help on, financially and the research that you guys do, because you're all volunteers, with the exception of the guy who runs your website. You guys all do this as a labor of love. I think that gets lost in translation as well.
Yeah, that's exactly the case. And, to be clear, I attended the stakeholders meeting in Rhode Island to bring this issue up. But, the president and CEO, Charlie and Henry, had both been already thinking about this and trying to establish some ways to rebuild it. And I was there to reinforce that. And Don Kern, who I'd never met, was there for the same reason. And, we had a meeting with CEO and president and a few of us to talk about getting this moving, and some commitments have been made. So we've got the ball started. And we just need to keep pushing it along and get as far as we can, as quick as we can.
Well, maybe we can give Charlie a little video push out of this after we talk to Don, and maybe you'll watch this. And with the addition of Molly, he's made some really good hires in the short term. Their communications director is first class. Obviously, the new Olympic coach who's on this show, I was really impressed with. We've all been impressed with Charlie. So to our favorite curler, up there in Duluth, and we're coming up, by the way, sometime. I hope, I've been saying this for I think a year now. We've been coming up that way, but we're finishing up our ski show in Duluth with the Mid-Am someplace around the end of February. So hopefully we can stop in and curl a little bit, drink a beer, and have some fun. But Keith, I appreciate your friendship more than you know, and you are probably one of the most knowledgeable guys we've had on this show in the 5 years we've been doing it. So thanks for your time, and appreciate it, and have a good rest of the cold weather up there.
Thanks, as always, Greg.
I want to thank Molly and Keith for coming aboard. We were going to speak with a couple more folks on the PHRF. There's all kinds of subtle gray areas about PHRF. We're just looking at one area that might be a consideration as we move into 2026 and as US Sailing is maybe getting a larger staff and sort of fleshing out what they're trying to do. It might be an interesting marriage for both PHRF, which is kind of a standalone operation for the last few years, as Keith explained. And again, this is just a discussion point, water cooler conversation, and we'll see how that goes. But we appreciate you watching, and we appreciate our guest. We'll be back next month with some of the conversations we've had. And for all of us still on the ski slopes, have fun, stay warm. Thanks for watching.